6 white men sat in a basement in Memphis, Tennessee, plotting a murder. Their target was Nat King Cole, the most famous black entertainer in America. The man whose voice captivated white women and whose success enraged white men. The plan was straightforward. Wait until after the concert. Follow him to his car, beat him to death with baseball bats, and send a warning that black performers were not welcome in the South. What they did not expect was Bumpy Johnson. When Bumpy learned that Harlem's greatest singer was being hunted, he didn't make a phone call or send a message. He boarded a train, traveled 1,000 miles, and walked into that basement 3 days before the concert. He didn't carry a bat. He carried his razor. What happened there made 6 racists realize they had made the final mistake of their lives. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. Nat King Cole was 31 years old and at the height of his career. Mona Lisa had just reached #1 on the charts. It's the first time a black artist had achieved that level of mainstream success. His voice was smooth, his piano playing brilliant, and his crossover appeal unmatched. White audiences loved him, and that was precisely the problem in 1950. The South was ready to explode. The civil rights movement was beginning to rise. Black artists were gaining success that made them visible. Influential and threatening to the racial order white supremacists had built their world upon. Nat King Cole embodied everything they feared, a black man who was wealthy, famous, talented, and admired by white women. A black man who refused to stay in his place. A black man who dared to be exceptional. So when his tour announced a stop at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis on September 17th, certain people decided to act. September 8th, 1950, 9:45 p.m. Garrett's Steakhouse. Downtown Memphis, Marcus Webb moved through the dining room like a shadow scene, but unnoticed. The way black waiters had learned to survive in white spaces. Marcus was 34 years old and had worked at Garrett's for 6 years. It was one of Memphis's finest restaurants, whites only, expensive steaks, bourbon that cost more per glass than Marcus earned in a day. A place where powerful men gathered to discuss business, politics, and other matters they didn't want overheard. But Marcus heard everything. Table 7 had been drinking since 7 p.m. 6 white men in tailored suits, cigars in hand, their laughter growing louder with each round. Marcus recognized the type: business owners, professionals, men who owned property, businesses, and people. As he refilled their bourbon, he kept his expression neutral and his ears open. "That colored boy thinks he can just stroll into Memphis and sing for white women," said the thick-necked man at the head of the table. Thomas Crenshaw. Marcus knew him, a construction company owner with money and a reputation for cruelty. Nat King Cole. Edward Willis added, "The bank manager, making millions off our people. It's an insult. Someone ought to teach him a lesson." Robert Hayes muttered. "We will," said David Morrison. And Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Morrison was a detective with the Memphis Police Department. Everyone in the black community knew his name and his history of brutality. Thursday night. Carl's basement. 9 o'clock, Morrison continued. "We finalized everything." "Baseball bats," said another man, James Tucker, the lumberyard owner. "Simple, effective. After the concert. Parking lot. Done." They laughed. Marcus kept pouring, kept his face empty, kept his breathing steady. The 6th man, Carl Jennings, the hardware store owner, lifted his glass to sending a message. To putting that uppity underscore back in his place, Crenshaw added. They drank. Marcus refilled their glasses. His hands stayed still. They had to. Not here. Not now. But his thoughts were racing. Nat King Cole. Concert. Baseball bats. Murder. A Thursday meeting at 11:30. P.M. After table 7 finally left, Marcus found the payphone in the kitchen. His hands were shaking now. He dialed a number he had memorized 3 years earlier. A number given to him by a Pullman porter who had said, "If you ever hear something important, Something dangerous. You called this number and asked for Bumpy Johnson. The phone rang 3 times. A deep voice answered. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, Marcus said quietly. My name is Marcus Webb. I work at a restaurant in Memphis. I just heard something you need to know. It's about Nat King Cole. There was a pause. Then the voice said, I'm listening. Marcus told him everything. The 6 men, their names, the Thursday meeting in the basement of Carl Jennings's hardware store, the baseball bats, the parking lot plan, the concert on September 17th. When he finished, Bumpy Johnson was silent for a long moment. You've got faces to go with these names. Yes, sir. I served them all night. I know every one of them. One's a police detective, David Morrison. Okay, Bumpy said. Marcus, you did the right thing calling me. Now, listen carefully. You forget this conversation ever happened. You go to work tomorrow like normal. You don't tell anyone what you heard. You understand? Yes, sir. If anything happens, if these men think you've hurt them, you call this number right away. I'll handle it, Mr. Johnson. Marcus asked. Are you going to stop them? Bumpy's voice turned cold. I'm going to do more than stop them. I'm going to make sure they never threaten another black artist as long as they live. The line went dead. Marcus hung up, his hands still trembling. He didn't really know who Bumpy Johnson was, just a name, a number, a voice in the dark. But something in that voice told him Nat King Cole would be safe. Bumpy Johnson set the phone down and sat in silence for a full minute. At 35, he was Harlem's undisputed king. 3 years out of Sing Sing, he had taken control of the numbers racket, built his protection network, made it clear to every gangster in New York that Harlem belonged to him. But Memphis was 1,000 miles away. The concert was 9 days off, and 6 racists with police protection were planning to murder Nat King Cole. Bumpy looked at the money on his desk. $18,000 from the week's numbers take. Enough to buy a small building. Enough to grow his operation. Enough to matter. He pushed it aside. At 5 a.m., Bumpy packed 2 suits, toiletries, his straight razor, a .38 revolver. At 6 a.m., he boarded the southbound train from Penn Station to Memphis. 40 hours across 6 states. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He didn't need to. Stephanie St. Clair would run Harlem while he was gone. Some things mattered more than business. Some things were worth 1,000 miles and every dollar in his pocket. Nat King Cole's voice was one of those things. 40 hours later, Bumpy stepped off the train at Memphis Union Station. The heat hit him immediately. Southern heat, heavy and damp. Unlike New York, he checked into a black boarding house on Beale Street under the name William Jackson, paid cash for a week, and got to work by Monday afternoon. Bumpy made his first contact. Samuel Sweet Sam Johnson, a barber who had worked in Harlem during the 1930s before moving back to Memphis. Sam owed Bumpy a favor from the old days. Bumpy walked into Sam's barbershop at 3 p.m. The room fell silent. Sam looked up from the customer he was shaving, and his face went pale. Bumpy Johnson, he said. Lord, have mercy. After the shop closed, they talked. Bumpy gave him the names Marcus had passed along. Sam filled in the gaps. Thomas Crenshaw Construction, money, racist, connected to the White Citizens Council. Edward Willis's bank manager, funding segregation efforts. Robert Hayes Insurance, quietly violent. James Tucker Lumber, supplier of wood for Klan crosses. David Morrison Detective, the muscle, the one who would make sure it looked like an accident. Carl Jennings hardware store owner. Hardware store, meeting location. They're serious. Bumpy, Sam said quietly. The Citizens Council has been talking about making an example, okay? Nat Cole's the perfect target, famous enough to matter, black enough to hate. Where's Jennings' store? Bumpy asked. Sam drew him a map. From September 11th through 13, Monday to Wednesday, Bumpy became a ghost in Memphis. He watched Carl Jennings's hardware store, learned the layout, found the basement entrance through the back alley unlocked. No security, amateurs. He paid $20 to a cleaning woman at First National Bank. She confirmed Edward Willis's schedule, his routine, his weaknesses. He tracked David Morrison, followed him from the precinct to Murphy's Tavern, where the detective drank every night after his shift. By Wednesday evening, September 13th, Bumpy had everything. 6 names, 6 faces, 6 targets. It's a meeting, Thursday, September 14th, 9 p.m., Jennings Hardware Basement. It's a concert, Sunday, September 17th, Ellis Auditorium. The plan: baseball bats, a parking lot ambush after the show. Bumpy had one day to stop them, one night to end it before it began. September 14th, 1950, Thursday, 8:45. P.M. Bumpy stood in the alley behind Jennings Hardware, dressed in black. Okay, in his right hand, his razor. Okay, in his waistband, the .38. At 9:10 p.m., all 6 men arrived. He could hear them through the basement window, laughing, joking about what they would do to that colored boy. Bumpy tried the back door. Unlocked. He stepped inside. The basement was lit by a single, hanging bulb. 6 men sat around a wooden table. 6 baseball bats leaned against the wall. A map of Ellis's auditorium lay spread out, an X marking the parking space where they planned to kill Nat King Cole. They were so focused on their planning that they didn't hear the door open. Bumpy closed it. The soft click made them turn. 6 white faces. 1 black man. 3 seconds of silence. Then Thomas Crenshaw stood, his chair scraping. "Who the hell are you? This is private." Bumpy walked to the table and placed his razor on the map, directly over the X. "Sit down," he said quietly. Crenshaw didn't move. "I don't know who you think." Bumpy pulled the .38 from his waistband and held it loosely at his side. "I said, sit the underscore down." Crenshaw sat. Bumpy looked around the table. 6 men, all larger than him, all with weapons within reach, all afraid. "My name's Bumpy Johnson. I'm from Harlem, New York, and I'm here because I hear you gentlemen are planning to murder Nat King Cole." Edward Willis tried to speak. "We don't know. Don't lie to me," Bumpy cut in. "I know your names: Thomas Crenshaw, Edward Willis, Robert Hayes, James Tucker, David Morrison." He looked directly at him. "Yes, detective. I know you're a cop, okay? And Carl Jennings, stupid enough to host a murder conspiracy in his own basement." He gestured toward the bats. "I know you bought 6 Louisville sluggers. I know the plan. Wait until after the concert. Key followed Nat to his car. Beat him to death. Send a message." The 6 men exchanged looks. Edward Willis's hand drifted toward his hip, where his service weapon should have been. He had left it at the station, not wanting to bring it to a private meeting. "Looking for this?" Bumpy tapped his .38. "I'm armed, detective. You're not, so sit still and shut up." Morrison's hand froze. "Here's what's going to happen," Bumpy said. His voice was calm, almost friendly, which made it even more frightening. "On September 17th, Nat King Cole is going to walk into that auditorium. He's going to perform. He's going to walk out. And he's going to leave Memphis without a single scratch." Thomas Crenshaw found either his courage or his foolishness. "Okay." He reached for one of the baseball bats. Bumpy moved, not with the gun, but with the razor. The blade flashed. Crenshaw screamed. A deep slice opened across his reaching forearm. Not deep enough to sever tendons, but deep enough to bleed and leave a permanent scar. Crenshaw collapsed back into his chair, clutching his arm as blood spilled onto the floor. Bumpy raised the razor, now red. "Anyone else want to try?" No one moved. "Good. Now let me explain something. You 6 think you're dangerous because you have bats, numbers, and a cop on your side. Let me tell you what real danger is." Bumpy walked slowly around the table, razor in one hand, gun in the other. Real danger is a man who traveled 1,000 miles to protect someone he's never met. Real danger is a man who's killed more people than you've ever threatened. Real danger is me deciding, right now, whether you six deserve to keep breathing. He stopped behind Robert Hayes and pressed the razor against his throat. Hayes froze, eyes wide. This blade has opened 37 throats in Harlem. Men tougher than you. Men smarter than you. You know what they all had in common? Silence. Only Hayes's ragged breathing filled the room. They forgot that some people are protected, that some lines don't get crossed. Bumpy pressed the blade just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. Hayes made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a sob. Nat King Cole is one of those people. He's Harlem's voice, Harlem's pride, and Harlem protects its own even 1,000 miles from home. Bumpy stepped back. Hayes slumped forward, his hand going to his bleeding neck. Dark stains spread across James Tucker's pants. He had urinated on himself. Now, here's the new plan, Bumpy said. On September 17th, none of you will be anywhere near that auditorium. You'll be at home, at work, at church, but you will not be within a mile of Nat King Cole. And if we refuse, Willis whispered, then I kill all 6 of you. Bumpy said it the way a man talks about the weather. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I will hunt you down, one by one, and I will end you. He walked back to the table, picked up the map, and tore it in half. I know where you live. I know where you work. I know where your children go to school. Edward Willish's daughter takes piano lessons on Tuesdays at Mrs. Henderson's house on Poplar Street. Carl Jennings, your wife, shops at Cooper's Market every Saturday morning. David Morse and you drink at Murphy's Tavern every night after your shift. Their faces drained of color. If anything happens to Nat King Cole in Memphis, in Tennessee, anywhere in this country, I will assume it was you. And I will come back not with a razor, but with gasoline and matches. Bumpy moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Thomas Crenshaw is bleeding. Get him bandaged. Tell the hospital he cut himself on broken glass. Because if anyone hears about this meeting, if this shows up in a police report or a newspaper, I'll assume one of you talked. And talking has consequences. He looked at each man one last time. September 17th. Stay home. Stay alive. Bumpy stepped out into the Memphis night. September 17th, 1950. Sunday, Ellis, Torium. Bumpy had been watching the building since 2 o'clock p.m., positioned across the street, scanning every entrance, every face, every car entering the parking lot. At 7:30 p.m., Nat King Cole arrived in a black Cadillac. He stepped out, waved to the small group of fans, and smiled that familiar smile. Bumpy searched the crowd, checked faces, looked for the 6 men. They weren't there. At 8 p.m., Nat walked onto the stage. 2,000 people rose in a standing ovation before he even sat at the piano. Bumpy slipped inside and stood at the back of the auditorium. Inside the auditorium, Nat began to play. Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. His voice filled the room smooth, flawless, effortless. Every note was a reminder of why Bumpy had traveled 1,000 miles, why he had walked into a basement with 6 racists, why he had risked everything. Because this voice, this talent, was too precious to lose. After the concert, Nat signed autographs in the parking lot, laughed with fans, posed for photographs, climbed into his Cadillac, and drove safely back to his hotel. Bumpy watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he walked to the train station and boarded the midnight train back to Harlem. Nat King Cole never knew about the basement. He never knew about the 6 men with baseball bats. He never knew that Bumpy Johnson had traveled 1,000 miles and spilled blood to save his life. He only knew that his Memphis concert went perfectly, that the audience loved him, that he felt safe. Years later, in 1963, 2 years before his death from lung cancer, Nat was interviewed by Ebony magazine. The journalist asked, "You toured the South during the most dangerous years for black performers. Were you ever afraid?" Nat smiled that gentle smile. "You know, I probably should have been. The threats were real. The hatred was real. But somehow, I always felt protected, like guardian angels were watching over me." Guardian angels? The interviewer asked. "Maybe not angels," Nat said thoughtfully. "Maybe just good people. People I never met. People who believed music mattered more than hate. That beauty was worth protecting." He looked out the window. "I like to think that somewhere out there, people were fighting for me when I didn't even know I needed fighting for. That's faith. That's love. That's what kept me singing." Key was right. That something, that someone, was Bumpy Johnson, carrying a razor and a promise. Harlem's artists were protected, even 1,000 miles from home, in the Memphis boarding house where Bumpy had stayed. The landlady found something after he checked out: an envelope with $100 in cash and a note for Marcus Webb's family. It read, "Tell him William Jackson says thank you." The landlady gave the envelope to Sweet Sam, who tracked down Marcus. Marcus opened it, read the note, and understood. The voice on the phone had been real. The protection had been real. Nat King Cole had been saved by a man he would never meet. As for the 6 men in the basement, Thomas Crenshaw's arm never healed properly. The scar ran from wrist to elbow, thick and ugly. Robert Hayes left Memphis 6 months later, moved to Oklahoma, and never spoke of that September night. David Morrison resigned from the police force in 1951, citing personal reasons. The others stayed in Memphis, stayed quiet, and stayed away from black entertainers. And whenever Nat King Cole's name came up on the radio, in newspapers, in conversations, they changed the subject quickly. They remembered the man with the razor, and they knew he kept his promises. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. The night 6 racists planned a murder, and Bumpy Johnson stopped it before it began. The night one man's blood was spilled, so another man's voice could sing. The night a waiter made a phone call that changed everything. This is the story Nat King Cole never knew, the guardian angel he never met, the protection he never saw. But Harlem knew, Memphis knew, and every racist in the South learned: you can hate, you can threaten, you can plan, but Harlem's artists are protected, always, forever, even 1,000 miles from home. That isn't just protection. That's love. And that's power. If this story of courage, sacrifice, and quiet heroism moved you, subscribe and like. Share it with someone who needs to understand that real heroes don't always get credit. They just get the job done. Leave a comment. Have you ever been protected by someone you never knew was there? Let's keep these untold stories alive.